Miracles can happen. Sometimes they're just long in the making. Welcome to WatchMojo.com, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 missing people who were eventually found.
Elizabeth's rescue was a huge story. Many who'd followed the case had long since assumed she was dead.
Before we begin, we publish new content every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. For this list, we're looking at people who disappeared for a lengthy period of time and then turned up again. They may have disappeared against their will or of their own accord.
Stayner said he didn't try to contact his real family for 7 years because Parnell had brainwashed him, making him think his parents didn't want him.
Number 10. Michele Whitaker. In 2002, this then Waffle House employee left her family home following an argument with her mother and didn't come back. The police started looking into her case, redoubling their efforts when Heather Sellers, another worker at Waffle House, went missing a matter of weeks later. Police seemingly feared that Sellers' boyfriend, a suspect in an earlier murder, may have killed both women. 6 years later, the boyfriend's story shows up on a true crime TV show, and a woman sees the picture of his suspected victim, Whitaker, and recognizes her as a neighbor. Whitaker had simply had enough of her old life and started anew somewhere else, but ultimately reunited with her family. Number 9. Denise Desruisseaux Bolser.
There didn't seem to be any answers to this riddle.
With the most shocking twist coming at the very end.
When a woman disappears and her husband finds a note saying, "We've got your wife," kidnapping is a logical conclusion. Either that or the husband murdered her and is trying to cover it up. Such were the circumstances when this New Hampshire bookkeeper disappeared in 1985, but neither murder nor kidnapping were seriously entertained for very long. The next year, Bolser was charged with embezzling at the company where she worked. It turns out, having been threatened by her boss, she left town, eventually settling in Florida where she started over. It wasn't until 2002 that she was found, by which time the charges had been dropped.
She wrote the ransom note, drove to the airport, paid cash for a plane ticket, and disappeared.
Number 8. Brenda Heist.
At the age of 54, her daughter was 8. Her son was 12 when Heist chose to walk away.
In 2002, this Pennsylvania mother of 2 was getting divorced and felt overwhelmed. 3 strangers offered a sympathetic ear and she disappeared with them, leaving behind her kids and her estranged husband, who assumed the worst. Eventually, in 2010, the husband had her declared legally dead and remarried. But 3 years later, Heist showed up. Having essentially lived as a vagrant for 11 years, she turned herself in to officials in Florida and told them she was a missing person. She was reunited with her family, but the scars she inflicted when she left her family appear to have been slow to heal.
I don't know that I've ever stopped crying and started living, to be honest with you.
Number 7. Gabriel Nagy. Despite its frequent use in movies and TV, severe amnesia is a pretty rare occurrence.
What's your name?
I don't know.
But not rare enough for Australian Gabriel Nagy and his family. On January 21, 1987, the father of 2 disappeared, withdrawing money from his bank 2 weeks later. And then there were no clues as to his whereabouts for 23 years. All that's known is that he suffered a severe blow to the back of the head that left him with total amnesia. Eventually, he recalled his real name and applied for a Medicare card, and that brought him to the attention of a constable who had never given up looking for him. Number 6. Lula Cora Hood. Lula Cora Hood was a single mother of 4 in Illinois who, reportedly suffering from a mental illness, had her sister adopt her kids but remain active in their lives. Then, in 1970, after a heated family argument, Hood disappeared. When she didn't come back, her family grew worried. Unfortunately, there were no clues as to what could have happened to her, until 1996, when a skeleton was found in a neighborhood brickyard. It was assumed that these remains were Lula's. Then, in 2011, 84-year-old Lula was located in Jacksonville, Florida. The skeleton in the brickyard? That remains a mystery. Number 5. Nguyen Thi. In 1992, Nguyen Thi was a 16-year-old Vietnamese girl who, like many her age, just wanted to have some fun. When she stayed out past her curfew one night, however, she found herself locked out of her house. She went to a late-night karaoke bar where she encountered a woman who acted friendly. The next thing she remembers is waking up in China. She had been kidnapped and sold as a wife to a Chinese farmer who beat and chained her. During her time in captivity, she met a truck driver who helped her escape back to her family after 21 years. Number 4. Stephen Stayner.
25 years ago, the nation was shocked and overjoyed to hear that 2 missing children had been found alive.
The sad story of Stephen Stayner is well known, largely due to a 1989 TV miniseries adaptation. When he was 7 years old, he was abducted by Kenneth Parnell, a pedophile who abused him over the next 7 years. Parnell also convinced Stayner that he had been given legal custody of the boy, claiming his family didn't have enough money to keep him. When Stayner was 14, Parnell kidnapped a new child named Timothy. Afraid for Timothy, Stayner ran away with him and was finally reunited with his family, although readjusting to normal life was reportedly very difficult. In 1989, after starting a family of his own, Stayner tragically died in a motorcycle accident. Number 3. Elizabeth Smart.
Violently ripped from her own home and her own bed in the middle of the night.
Elizabeth Smart's terrifying story was also the basis for a TV adaptation. At the age of 14, the Salt Lake City youth was forcibly abducted from her bedroom by a man named Brian David Mitchell. She was held captive and abused over 9 months by Mitchell and his wife, Wanda Eileen Barzee. Eventually, Smart's younger sister, who had witnessed the abduction, was able to identify Mitchell's voice as one belonging to someone who had done odd jobs for the family. After the case was profiled on America's Most Wanted, Mitchell was identified and Smart was saved. Her horrifying experience has made the now adult Smart a leading child safety advocate and champion in the fight against human trafficking.
The scariest night of my life happened 11 years ago.
She's sharing her story to help other victims of abuse.
Number 2. J.C. Dugard.
For 18 years, she was forbidden to say her own name, so this is how her book, A Stolen Life, begins.
In 1991, 11-year-old J.C. Dugard was kidnapped while waiting for the school bus. 18 years later, a parole officer discovered J.C. when investigating her abductor, Philip Garrido, and his wife. J.C. had been forced to bear 2 children for Garrido, and had been kept for years in a series of tents and sheds in his backyard. She had been trained not to talk about her real life, but to pretend that she and her daughters were all Nancy's children instead. Dugard now concentrates on making up for lost time and raising her daughters.
Do you worry at some point they'll want to see him?
I want them to make their own choices in life, and if that's something that they need to do, then...
Really? You'd be okay with that?
I wouldn't be okay with it, but I wouldn't not let them do it.
Number 1. Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina DeJesus. A lowlife by the name of Ariel Castro kidnapped 3 young women between 2002 and 2004. 21-year-old Michelle Knight, 16-year-old Amanda Berry, and 14-year-old Gina DeJesus. They were horribly beaten, starved, and raped, with Berry eventually bearing a child. Locked away in Castro's house in Cleveland, they dreamed of release. One day in 2013, when Castro was away, Berry was able to make contact with neighbors who kicked a hole in the door so she could escape.
So we kick the bottom, and she comes out with the little girl, and she says, "Call 911. My name is Amanda Berry."
She phoned the police, who then rescued Knight and DeJesus. Castro was sentenced to life plus 1,000 years, but took his own life just 1 month into his sentence.
I spent 11 years in hell. Now your hell is just beginning.
Do you agree with our picks? Check out these other great clips from WatchMojo and subscribe for new videos every day.